Layla Drew adjusted her name tag as she stepped into the marble halls of the city's prestigious art museum, her footsteps quiet against the polished floors. The gift shop was tucked just beyond the grand entrance, its glass cases gleaming under soft spotlights, displaying delicate porcelain and replica sculptures. The soft murmur of wealthy patrons discussing the latest exhibition drifted through the air, mingling with the faint scent of fresh flowers arranged near the concierge desk. Clad in a simple blouse and black slacks, Layla blended discreetly behind the sales counter, her posture respectful, eyes attentive yet humble. Her hands smoothed a stack of art postcards while she listened for any customer's request. The patrons were impeccably dressed, their laughter light but hesitant, as if the grandeur of the setting required a certain carefulness in their movements. She felt out of place, a threadbare stitch in a garment woven from silk and satin, but determined to do her job well. The afternoon was busy with guests browsing through prints and jewelry, when an abrupt clatter shattered the calm. Layla's head snapped toward the source. An expensive glass sculpture near the shop's entrance lay in shards on the floor. Gasps echoed around like ripples, and all eyes turned to the display. The museum director appeared swiftly, his expression tight as he scanned the gathered crowd. Without hesitation, he pointed at Layla. This was under your watch. How could you be so careless?" A few staffers nodded, and whispers began, some doubtful, some downright scornful. One patron shook her head visibly, muttering about unsuitable staff. Layla's cheeks flushed, she opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat under the weight of accusation. Within moments, she was being escorted out, the sting of humiliation sharp against her chest. Alone, she stepped into the bright afternoon light, knowing with painful clarity she had been blamed unjustly. At her small apartment, the evening light waned through the thin curtains, casting muted shadows across the worn furniture. Layla Drew sat motionless on the edge of her couch, the silence pressing in around her. The events of the day replayed relentlessly in her mind, the sharp accusation, the cold dismissal, the judging eyes. Her stomach churned with a mix of disbelief and despair. She wanted nothing more than to disappear. She stared at the plain ceramic mug in her hands, untouched and growing cold from the forgotten tea inside. Layla had never felt so hollow. The phone lay beside her, silent and unyielding, devoid of comforting messages or calls. Eating seemed futile, and sleep a distant promise. The hum of the city outside barely registered with her. This apartment, once a refuge, now felt like a cage. Her mind shifted back to flashes of the past, sharper than the ache of her present. Years ago, she had been a promising art student, brimming with dreams and determination. She vividly recalled the feel of pastel chalk dust on her fingers, the exhilaration of capturing light and shadow on canvas during long nights in the studio. Her professors praised her talent. She had an effortless way with composition, an eye for the subtle beauty others missed. But life had different plans. When her mother's health declined suddenly, Layla put her ambitions aside without hesitation. She became a caregiver, navigating endless hospital visits and sleepless nights. The bright future faded as she juggled jobs to cover bills and medications, sacrificing her art for the steady rhythm of work and worry. There were days when exhaustion weighed so heavily she could hardly lift her brush, let alone her spirits. She had given up so much, her education, friendships, moments of youthful freedom, all to keep her mother safe. Even after her mother passed, Layla buried her grief beneath a constant hustle, thinking that stability mattered most. She had learned patience and humility, shaping herself into someone reliable, someone unnoticed but steady. Landing the job at the museum gift shop had felt like a quiet victory, a tentative step back toward a world she once loved. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay barely kept the lights on, but Layla had jumped at the chance. She had spent weeks memorizing the inventory, mastering the register, and practicing polite conversation, eager to prove she belonged in this new space. Finally, here she was, surrounded by art and elegance she admired, feeling a flicker of hope rekindled. Now, that hope was shattered as vividly as the glass sculpture she was blamed for breaking. The unfairness gnawed at her. She was the first to arrive at work that morning, careful with every movement, respectful toward every visitor. She had not even been near the display when the sculpture fell. Yet the director's finger had pointed at her without hesitation, accompanied by cruelty masked as authority. Layla's thoughts flickered back to her co-workers' faces as they whispered and stared. She had always felt like an outsider among them, not just because of her simple clothes or quiet demeanor, but because the world they inhabited seemed so different from hers. Their polite smiles barely sheathed the assumptions they made about a woman like her, someone from a background less privileged. And now, their judgments had turned into condemnation. Her pride, a fragile ember all day, now smoldered beneath the ache of rejection. She remembered how she swallowed her objections when escorted out, how the public shame weighed down her steps as the crowd's eyes bore into her back. This wasn't just about a broken piece of art, it was a dismissal of her integrity, her worth. The night deepened, and Layla's thoughts grew heavier. How would she explain this to those she depended on? What chance did she have of finding work again while carrying such a blemish? The future seemed suddenly narrow and cold, like the darkened room around her. Yet beneath the sorrow, a quiet resolve began to grow. Somewhere, beneath layers of humiliation and pain, Layla clung to the conviction that she was innocent. This was not the end for her, it could not be. Even if the world seemed deaf to her voice now, she would find a way to be heard. But for now, she allowed herself the small comfort of tears, letting the long hours wash over her like a storm. Then, as dawn threatened the horizon, Layla wiped her cheeks and rubbed her hands together. The modest woman who had weathered hardships before would rise once more. Not out of bravado or anger, but out of necessity, because she knew the truth, and the truth deserved its chance. Days passed like slow-moving shadows after Layla was dismissed from the museum. She kept to herself, weaving through the small routines of her life, yet the injustice of the broken sculpture accusation throbbed in the background like a persistent ache. Sleep still evaded her easily, but sleep was no sanctuary. It only invited vivid replays of the ordeal. One restless afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the windowpane, a fleeting detail came to her. She recalled hearing a whispered conversation near the sculpture's display just before the crash. A man's irritated voice, heated and sharp, arguing with a woman nearby. She hadn't been close enough to overhear the words clearly, but something about that moment didn't fit the story the director told. Their timing was off in her memory. Without letting the seed of doubt take root fully, Layla reached for her phone and dialed the museum's main number. The receptionist's polite voice greeted her, but when Layla asked to speak with someone about the incident, she was told firmly the matter was closed. The director has handled it. There's nothing more to discuss. Her heart sank, but she remained calm. I understand, but I believe there's important information that could clear my name. Is there anyone from security I could speak with? After a pause, the receptionist relented. There's a security guard on duty, Martin. You can try calling. Layla quickly dialed Martin's number, hoping for a sympathetic ear. Mary? The voice was cautious but familiar. Martin, a middle-aged man with a quiet demeanor, had often been the one to open for late shifts in the gift shop. They'd exchanged nods but never more. Yes, it's Layla, she said gently. I need to talk about the sculpture incident. I'm innocent, but the management isn't listening. Do you have the security footage from that day? There was silence, then Martin's voice softened. I've always thought it strange how quickly things got pinned on you. I'll meet you at the museum after hours. That evening, under the venue's soft security lights, Layla and Martin stood before the monitors in a small, dimly lit office at the back of the museum. The quiet buzz of the security system filled the space. Martin navigated the digital archive with practiced ease, pulling up the video from the day the sculpture broke. They watched the footage on the screen. Layla's eyes sharpened, following every detail. The video showed her working diligently behind the counter, focused and careful. Then, near the sculpture, a well-dressed visitor argued angrily with a companion. The man's arm erratically waved, accidentally striking the glass display stand. The sculpture teetered, then shattered as the crowd gasped. The man glanced around nervously and quickly stepped away, leaving no attempt to report the accident. Layla's breath caught. This was the moment, the evidence she needed to prove her innocence. Martin nodded gravely. You weren't even near it. You were blamed unfairly. Relieved but still cautious, Layla asked, "Can we take this to the museum board?" "The director won't listen to me." "I can help get the footage to them quietly," Martin said. "They need to see this." Together, they arranged to have the clip forwarded directly to the museum's board of trustees, bypassing the management chain that had accused Layla. The security guard's quiet support was a balm to Layla's wounded confidence. After leaving the museum that night, Layla walked home beneath flickering streetlights, the weight on her shoulders lifting just enough to let a faint spark of hope reappear. She knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but the truth was beginning to clear the fog. The following days stretched with anxious waiting. Layla kept her phone close, her heart pounding with every unexpected vibration, hoping that the board would respond. Meanwhile, whispers in the museum's halls shifted. Several staff members, seeing the growing attention around the sculpture incident, became more hesitant when speaking about it. Rumors spread quietly that the director might be facing questions. One afternoon, Layla called again to the museum, politely asking if any news had come from the board. The receptionist admitted they had passed along her inquiry but said nothing concrete could be shared yet. Despite the waiting, Layla refused to let despair back in. She reached out to an old friend, Amelia, a local journalist who had once admired her discipline and kindness. Amelia's interest peaked when Layla recounted the incident and her growing hope. "You need to hold your ground," Amelia advised. "Sometimes, it's about getting the right people to listen." Encouraged, Layla continued to prepare herself for the moment when the truth would finally be revealed, ready to stand not just for herself but for the dignity that had been so unfairly stripped from her. The night of the museum's annual gala arrived with a crisp chill in the air, the city aglow with sparkling lights and the hum of anticipation. Layla stood quietly among the crowd gathered in the grand hall, a modest presence amid the throng of elegant gowns and tailored suits. Though her simple dress and unadorned hair made her easy to overlook, her eyes held a steadiness that hadn't been there weeks before. The museum board had arranged for the footage that cleared Layla's name to be shown during the gala, a carefully orchestrated moment designed to right the wrong done to her. The board chairman, a poised woman named Eleanor Jacobs, stepped forward to address the assembled guests. "Tonight," Eleanor began, "we have a matter of importance to correct a previous judgment that unfairly affected one of our own. Recently, a valued member of our museum family was wrongfully accused of damaging a priceless sculpture. Thanks to new evidence, we can now set the record straight." With a nod, she motioned toward a large screen, and the security footage began to play. Faces turned, eyes fixed as the carefully captured moments appeared: the man in the dispute, his agitated gestures, the accidental strike on the glass stand, and his swift retreat from the scene. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Layla held her breath, but her gaze was fixed ahead. The director who had accused her, Mr. Langston, stood awkwardly nearby, his confident veneer visibly cracking. His jaw clenched as the video showed the real cause of the accident was no careless clerk, but a VIP guest, a well-known art collector with a reputation for sharp dealings. Whispers escalated into low conversations. The weight of the truth began to shift the atmosphere. The accused clerk was no longer the target of suspicion. Instead, eyes now turned toward the real culprit, who smiled nervously, attempting to maintain composure but visibly unsettled. Eleanor stepped forward again, addressing the room. "We regret the distress caused by the initial accusation and will take appropriate action to prevent such an error from happening again. Our commitment is to fairness and respect for all members of our community." Mr. Langston's cheeks flushed, and he avoided eye contact. Some guests exchanged surprised glances, questioning his hastiness in blaming Layla without proper investigation. The guest responsible shifted uncomfortably under the increasing scrutiny. Encouraged by the gathering support, Layla found her voice during a brief moment when Eleanor invited her to say a few words. She stepped forward, calm but resolute. "I'm grateful the board took the time to look beyond the surface. It's been difficult, but I never doubted the truth. I hope this can remind us all to seek fairness and understanding before making judgments." Polite applause grew into genuine warmth from those who recognized her courage and dignity. The staff members who had doubted her now approached with smiles of apology and respect, their earlier skepticism replaced by admiration. As the evening carried on, Layla felt a lightness she hadn't known in weeks. The crowd's changing mood was a vivid contrast to the cold whispers and scorn she had heard before. Here, in this space filled with art and history, her voice had finally been heard. The real culprit attempted to deflect responsibility quietly but found little success as more guests discussed the incident in hushed tones, casting long shadows over his reputation. The director stood silently, the weight of the gala's revelations pressing heavily on his shoulders. By night's end, Layla stepped outside into the cool air, her heart steady and face illuminated by the city's glow. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, for the first time in weeks, she felt seen, not as a scapegoat or an outsider, but as a person whose truth had been recognized and whose dignity was restored. In the days that followed the gala, the reverberations of truth echoed through the hallowed halls of the museum more insistently than anyone had expected. Layla Drew, once dismissed silently and shamed, now found herself at the eye of a subtle but profound change. The museum's leadership wasted no time in addressing the consequences of the mistaken blame. The board took decisive action, issuing a formal reprimand toward Edward Whitman, the wealthy art collector who had inadvertently caused the sculpture's fall. Invitations to future events were swiftly rescinded, and his previously unblemished status among the elite was notably tarnished by the public acknowledgement of his role in the incident. The museum's governing body was clear: no visitor, regardless of social standing, was above responsibility. Mr. Langston, the museum director whose prompt and harsh accusation had set the cascade in motion, was called to account. Though his pride bristled fiercely, he understood the gravity of his misstep. He issued a public apology, brief, direct, and tinged with genuine remorse during a staff meeting that was both uncomfortable and necessary. The apology did not erase the damage, but it was a step toward mending fractured trust and demonstrating accountability within the institution. For Layla, however, the most tangible sign of justice came sooner than she had hoped. A few days after the gala, Eleanor Jacobs, the board chairman who had championed her case, requested a private meeting. The conference room was modest but bathed in the warm afternoon light filtering through tall windows, casting a calm glow over their conversation. "Layla," Eleanor began, her voice steady yet kind, "what you endured was unjust, and you maintained dignity throughout it. We want to make sure you know how much the museum values you, not just for your work in the gift shop, but as a person of integrity." Layla listened, heart pounding softly. "We would like to offer you the position of assistant manager of the gift shop," Eleanor continued, "to recognize your dedication and the strength you've shown. We believe you are the right person to help lead this part of the museum forward." A swell of emotion rose inside Layla. Gratitude mingled with disbelief. She had never imagined such an offer after everything. But beyond the title, it was respect and acknowledgement she craved most. "Thank you," she found herself saying, voice steady but warm. "I'm honored. I will do my best to earn your trust." With that, a new chapter began. The promotion transformed not only Layla's responsibilities but how she was perceived. Her co-workers' whispers shifted tone, evolving from suspicion and judgment to encouragement and admiration. Several approached her with genuine apologies, their earlier skepticism replaced by respect. Amelia, the journalist friend who had encouraged Layla during her darkest moments, soon published a thoughtful article detailing Layla's journey from humiliation to vindication. The piece emphasized her quiet resilience and unwavering honesty, striking a chord with many readers who applauded her fortitude. The museum's patrons took notice as well. Attendance and donations increased, buoyed by the institution's commitment to transparency and fairness. Visitors greeted Layla with smiles and kind words, some sharing stories of their own struggles and the power of being heard. Even Edward Whitman's retreat from the social circuit was remarked upon in hushed tones, signaling a gentle lesson about accountability that few expected at such an elite gathering. On a brisk afternoon, during her first week back at the museum as assistant manager, Layla encountered Mr. Langston in the staff lounge. He seemed smaller somehow, burdened by the mantle of his errors. "Layla," he began quietly, "I want to personally apologize for what happened. I was wrong to act as I did without proper evidence." Layla regarded him calmly, the hurt still fresh but tempered by the closure that had been reached. "I appreciate your words," she replied with measured grace. "What matters now is that we move forward with honesty and respect." His nod was solemn, a silent acknowledgement that the past could not be undone but the future remained open. That morning, Layla arrived early, sunlight spilling through the gift shop's expansive windows. She arranged the merchandise meticulously, fine art prints, delicate jewelry inspired by sculptures, and handmade crafts from local artists. Each item was a symbol of the museum's connection to its community, and now she had a voice in shaping that connection. The soft chime of the door announced the arrival of the first customer. Layla greeted them with a warm smile and steady eyes, no longer shrinking into the background but standing confidently, grounded and assured. As the day progressed, visitors offered nods of appreciation and gentle conversations that reminded her why she loved being part of a place devoted to art and culture. The museum, once a place where she felt invisible, now opened as a space of belonging. Later, standing outside under the early evening sky, Layla inhaled deeply. The city's lights shimmered around her, and she felt a quiet satisfaction that went beyond any promotion. This was her moment, not of empty victory, but of hard-won respect. The woman who had been wronged, judged harshly, and cast aside had reclaimed her dignity not with anger or bitterness, but with quiet determination and unshakable integrity. Her steps were steady, her head held high. The gift shop clerk, once the overlooked and misunderstood, had become a figure of strength, a testament to the power of truth persevering in the face of injustice. And as she walked beneath the city's glow, Layla Drew knew she belonged, not invisibly, but unmistakably, in the heart of the museum's story, and in the story of those who refuse to be defined by the judgments of others.